think the honorable thing for our species to do is deny our programming. Stop reproducing. Walk hand in hand into extinction. One last midnight, brothers and sisters opting out of a raw deal.
Do not trust any friends or family members. I repeat, do not trust friends.
I think history's over. I think we finally did it.
We peaked as a species.
Yeah.
Well, each vibration channel, I guess, in the suck pump thing controlled the movement. I don't know how that works.
I wanted to know if, and I could have very easily looked it up, I suppose. Like, I can't tell if like it works as a fleshlight and Doom, or whether or not he just basically, or otherwise it's just a little dildo control.
You know where we'll really peak as a civilization is when somebody speed runs that thing.
Yeah, if you could speed run Doom 1 with your penis as the controller. That's what I'm phoning it in. Yeah. I'm saying that's it for me. I'm ready.
That sounds like a mutant power almost.
It does. Yeah. It really does.
Sounds like
a deviant mutant power.
Yeah. Next step in human evolution. Say goodbye to Homo sapiens. Today on the Extinction Agenda with James
and Chris.
And today we're covering the comic series that's so nice. We're doing it twice. Grant Morrison's New X-Men. We've already covered on this podcast E for Extinction, but just going to do it again and probably say some of the exact same things that we said last time. But I'm hoping to bring. No, this thing's like evergreen. It's like a river that you can't put your hand into twice. And I don't know. It's I'm very excited. I've been excited all day. These are some of my favorite comics, particularly this opening gambit of E for Extinction, which is New X-Men, number 14 through 16, published. It was released from June to August of 2001, but the latest cover date was September 2001. And we're also going to cover the annual, the Flipbook annual, which was released in August 15th of 2001, but is also cover dated September. So both pre 9/11 comics, which kind of interesting. Chris, you've never. I mean, James and I have already talked about it. The New X-Men. What do you think of it?
I love these. I was excited. I hadn't read them since I first finished the series, like roughly after it released. So I was pretty excited to dip back into it, especially post Invisibles. Recognizing that is sort of the thing that he drifted into after Invisibles, and I'm excited to talk about it because I think there's a lot of connections. I think there's a lot to say about these.
Yeah, it'll be fun to excavate that stuff. Obviously, that's not the primary focus. This thing exists by itself, but in typical Morrisonian fashion, it's the same story told in a different way over and over. Different themes turned over in different ways. The same themes, turned over in different ways.
And their project at the time of just kind of dipping into the mainstream culture and kind of using superheroes as as a magical sigil. I think really this is sort of a focal point for that almost.
Yeah, I think so. Right up from because this comic never used prior to this. It didn't used to be called X-Men. It's called New X-Men, and the inversion of the new and the men is such a sigilistic trade design, and very clever it's almost like a hieroglyph. You even get those lines like is it pronounced I Ching or I Ching? I've never actually had to say it out loud.
I think it's I Ching.
Yeah. So it's just, it has, and then of course the big X and the symbol, those circles. So something's afoot here. It's this is one thing, like having read this and thought about it, I was like, you know what would have been a better way to even before jumping into this would have been to read that stuff he did for Marvel Knights, that Fantastic Four 1, 2, 3, 4 and Marvel Boy, as sort of a lead into this. Just I think that would have been interesting, you know, like seeing him starting to put this stuff together, and then yeah, the main event. But here we are. I just can't do anything right in life. James, how did you feel about it reading this for the unteenth millionth time?
I don't know. I think I picked up a couple new things, or at least a couple things maybe that are from a different angle than I thought. But yeah, I mean it's so good. But
yeah,
it's yeah, I don't know. I'm interested to hear what you guys have to say too on this. But yeah, it's I don't even know why it's so good. I can't pin it down because it felt really oddball to me this time. Like, I don't know if maybe that's just because it's getting dated, but it felt really like off brand for X-Men and like really like aggressive in its own direction. And then like that, like, and I know that's like, obviously when you bring in a big writer that's got their own ideas, they're not gonna, that's the whole point. And then I feel like this is kind of the birth of that. Like, I don't remember an X-Men book prior to this where they said, do whatever the fuck you want.
No, and yeah, and it was exactly the opposite. You know, like, so one of the reasons this series came about is because Marvel went into bankruptcy. They brought in Bill Jemas. The editor at the time is Bob Harris, and Bob Harris is the sort of guy that is just like as conservative as fuck. You know, like the kind of person that I could do without. Not conservative socially, but just like corporately, imaginatively. You know, like he's the kind of guy who rides the image revolution and uses that as, you know, like, just creates shitty comics like the kind that are being produced in Image because he sees that it sells. And there's no vision, and so Marvel's going bankrupt, not specifically because of Bob Harris, but certainly likely part of it. Bill Jemas comes in and he says, Joe Quesada, who's doing the Marvel Knights stuff at the time, he's like, okay, here you go, you're the editor in chief. And so yeah, they like, it's Marvel did this back with Daredevil way back when, like, and also you see it with Swamp Thing in DC Comics. It's a series that is like, it's not doing well, it's stagnating, it's lost its former glory, and so they bring in, and so the stakes are really kind of low because it's been consistently sort of floundering, and they're like, okay, well, let's just bring in new blood and have at thee. And so like Frank Miller's a good model for you know, it's a different type of storytelling to be sure, but I mean, like, that the archetype or the paradigm of the writer artist who comes in and redefines the book, that's been existing since Swamp Thing, that's been existing since Daredevil, and you know, you see it in Thor, and every once in a while it happens. It hadn't happened with X-Men, although, you know, people might say that Claremont Burns' original run had that sort of do whatever you want revolutionariness to it, and it might very well have. It certainly defined the line for 18 years. And, you know, and Morrison, I don't think Morrison had the same effect to the X-Men line. I think many of the ideas that gets thrown down in New X-Men they get picked up, but they get picked up badly. It's not until you get like Jonathan Hickman that comes in to maybe capture some of that juice. But anyway, that was a long digression.
Yeah, I see what you mean. That actually, I was looking at picking up that Frank Miller Daredevil, sort of where he rebirthed to the comic.
Oh yeah, and that stuff's great.
But this was I mean, I maybe should have. Yeah, like I feel like more like modern era, like the standard practice through the 70s, 80s, and 90s almost was to make sure that you we're going serialized like a sitcom, like Like, if this event's already happened, this event's already fucking happened. This needs to you need to continue, carry forward. And it was just like a complete, I shouldn't say that, because I mean, the characters are core, right? So there's not an insane disregard for what happened before, but in a way there is.
And there is. I think it's largely discarded, and spun, and
like, there's a school. Professor Xavier's a psychic. His students are basically a militarized hit team, and away we go. And that's sort of like, those are the core elements that he kept, and that felt like kind of it. I don't know.
Yeah, and then they fight the Sentinels, which are one of the original, X-Men number 15, number 16, like way back in the 60s. And they're not just any Sentinels. They are specifically those Sentinels, the Bolivar Trask Sentinels from X-Men 15 and 16. And that version, like that Bolivar Trask character, he and that version of the Sentinels, they haunt this series, really. Like, Morrison's looking to the deep past of the X-Men, at the same time as looking to the contemporary world, and also to what, like, Claremont's up to, and just trying to get a new sauce going, but in proper, it's still proper superhero stuff, because you're right, like, all the conventions are there. This is Morrison's great skill is to take superhero convention, and make it seem fresh, to the fullest extent possible, while also still just being the same fucking thing. But we'll get to it, but like, on commenting on that sort of behavior, there's always a self-consciousness to all of it.
Yeah. There's a willingness to take chances too, though. I mean, this whole thing is like everything leveled up one after another. I mean, and it really plays with the idea of evolution in that way. But like, every step is bumped up a level. Like, Cassandra Cain is like the next, so advanced that she's basically to mutants what mutants are to humans. Like, even I think it's almost funny, like, how Cerebro, like, Hank invents the machine that, like, is like 10 times more powerful than Cerebro, and it's just like a big dome that looks like Cerebro that he can step into. It's like, I'm looking forward to experiencing that. It's like almost a parody of the MO at work.
I think also that there's a twinning between Cerebra as the big dome, or the sort of womb with all, like, the tentacles, coming out the back, and the Master Mold, which is quite, like, they're not the same thing, but I mean, like, it's sort of like a masculine feminine type thing going on. That's not, like, just visually they have they rhyme in some way, in a way that I didn't expect, or really notice, or slow down enough to think about. I don't know what the consequences of that thought are. I was just sort of struck by it, by the role that machinery plays in this first story. It is all about. It's not so much about evolution. It's about the tools that mankind creates, for destruction and for exploration, and everything hinges around the Sentinels and Cerebra. And everything. Yeah. Anyway. Yeah. I just thought that was interesting.
Yeah, and there's something interesting about how the way that the Sentinels are cast. Like, when they first fight them, they're like commenting on how almost obsolete these, like, the Bolivar Trask Sentinels are. But then in the wild, Cassandra Cain brings Trask's descendants to the wild Sentinels, who are just like, they're like gun ostriches, or they've just kind of assembled themselves, and they can continue to assemble and adapt.
Gun ostriches.
Yeah, they're just like murdering soldiers.
I'm gonna be a dick and correct you. It's Cassandra Nova. Cassandra Cain is from Batman.
Oh my God! Sorry. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, you're right.
I
thought I was wrong.
No, my bad.
That's okay.
I had Cassandra Nova written in my notes, and I was like, oh my God, where'd you get that from then?
And I said that I know for certain that I said this in our original recording, but like, the opening image, the full page image of Cyclops and Wolverine fighting the Sentinel, and Wolverine's digging at its back, and Cyclops is literally blowing the creature's mind. And Wolverine, you can probably stop doing that now. It's just like, this is the same old shit that the X-Men have been up to, and we're done with it. And it's an opening statement, and also, like getting back to what we were saying, like almost a sigil, almost like a magical incantation, like I'm evoking something new, and watch me do it. And then you immediately cut to the Neanderthal being wiped out by Homo sapien. I think that like there's no like, it's just boom, like here's the main theme. Here's why humanity might be frightened of mutants. This notion of being like wiped out and looking to prehistory.
Yeah, that's really nice too. Like how Cassandra Nova it's a simulation that she's running for the Descendant, and it's all controlled by her thoughts. And he's like, no, I saw a documentary on TV that said like it wasn't violent like this, and she just kind of undercuts him with like, oh, television makes you an expert, right? But she's just showing him another screen where this is going on.
That's a good point. That's a good point. Well, she's the world's foremost evolutionary biologist.
Right.
I always thought that was interesting. She's dressed like a safari thing. The original Bolivar Trask was an anthropologist. How an anthropologist was able to create the Sentinels is, Jack Kirby, Stan Lee territory. But
in the 70s, a scientist was a scientist, man.
Well, he's not even a scientist. Yeah. Well, that's it, man. At least his kid was an engineer, but
mad anthropologist.
Yeah. But it's fitting though. Like there's a fittingness to that. Like anthropology is for so long, and so often up until the Franz Boas and that kind of in the post-war era, they are the prime. What's the word I'm looking for? I mean, like eugenics comes out of what used to pass for anthropology.
Yeah, they're like
racial science.
Yeah, apologists for white, control and colonialism and genocide and all that.
Yeah, and the Neanderthal in particular. So I might as well just, since it's right up front, right? So I'm reading that book, The Invention of Prehistory: Empire, Violence, and Our Obsession with Human Origins. It's a fucking banger. And there's a chapter on the Neanderthal. When this first hit in 2001, I assumed, Morrison's always reading Scientific American and New Scientist, blah, blah, blah. Like it's early internet days. So they're getting their information is different. They're actually reading magazines and stuff. And I just assumed that it must have been like a new idea about the Neanderthal being wiped out by Homo sapien. But it's quite old, like it dates back to the 1920s. And it was originally thought that the Neanderthal were like they were Homo stupidus. They were like the failed evolutionary project. And then slowly over time, and particularly in the post-war era, people came to decide that actually they were, evidence that they were quite sensitive and this, that, and the other thing. I should point out that the point of this book, this Invention of Prehistory, is that like prehistory is a mirror or a screen on which we just project our fantasies of human nature, and our justifications for violence, specifically in many cases. And so, all of this is just sort of constructed, but one of the constructions is that the Neanderthal was in fact quite gentle and quite, and William Golding of the Flies fame, not Lord of the Flies fame, his book after Lord of the Flies, stages this confrontation between Neanderthal and Homo sapien. And that's in like 1955 or so, The Inheritors. And the cunning and the reason and tool making of Homo sapiens is presented as like quite vicious. And the Neanderthal, they're actually almost telepathic, is what is communicated in the book. I haven't read it myself, but they have a sort of like super empathy. So it's very X-Men like. And anyway, yeah. So so this is a what Morrison's presenting here. Like I'm going, perhaps they even read the Inheritors, right? It's just like it's another instance of Morrison having an idea from the 1960s, and presenting it as pop.
Mhm.
And I think that's neat. And also, like, nowadays, Neanderthal are also like part of white panic, white replacement theory. This idea that, like, a more aggressive species will come in and not, like, kill you and rape you until you no longer exist.
Yeah. Well, that's
Uh,
literally what Cassandra's doing. Like she's
hmm,
projecting like a screen for this guy. Like it's a seduction where she's
yeah.
just and even at the time, like you wouldn't have the sort of blatant racism that you hear nowadays among the right and like the genocide crowd. But
Yeah.
it's like she is just blatant. She'll say she's saying the quiet parts loud, like constantly, like, oh, like what's gonna happen when mutants come and bash your brains in? Like it's the exact same thing. Like they are the humans that are about to slaughter you.
Yeah. Well, not just that. What are they going to do to your sister?
Yes.
Like, and these are just classic tropes,
Yeah.
and Morrison sings it well here, and then, like, unless we exterminate the mutant germline once and for all, humanely, of course. And then like, but Miss Nova, I'm only a dentist, and so, like, suddenly we're talking about the banality of evil. He's just some fucking guy who gets sold a fantasy. Like, she even talks about how, like, well, I know that you fantasize about keeping women and children mutants as slaves in your basement. Um, and yeah, it's a dentist that initiates all of this. Oh, well, Cassandra Nova does, but it's just through the Trask descendant who is
DNA.
a dentist. Yeah, yeah.
I
Um,
love the like when he activates it and he's like, was it evil what I did? What I've just done? She's like, oh, people will probably say, by God, he was evil, yes, but evil in a good way.
She, I didn't, I don't know if I noticed the first run through this or like one of our other runs through this anyway, but that she's funny. She almost has like a satire, like the way she like delivers, like she's delivering like almost like comedy like lines, like when she's talking about like exterminating a species. And she just seems like lighthearted and just consistently like uber arrogant. It's just such a weird villain to drop right in.
yeah, it's a very Morrison villain, of course, but definitely shades of Sir Miles, from the Invisibles. Like, when the dude is throwing up into his helmet, and those helmets look like insects now that I'm looking at it right now, and it's another parallel with Cerebra, that the X that goes over the eyes. There's something about the technology that enveloping the mind and covering. Anyway, yeah, he's throwing up into it, and she's like, very poetic, Mr. Trask. Um, yeah, a very, very sort of cool humor, and a biting humor.
And I think it's funny too that the technology, like even just in those first few pages, is delivered as like that's a cheap, sort of a cheap trick she used, and the same thing is sort of like delivered when then Cerebra is activated, that oh, be careful of the plastic edges, like my big crude mitts didn't I wasn't able to sort of shape the helmet the way I wanted. It's just like these are just like plastic fucking toys, like there's a sort of a junkiness delivered to the technology. The same thing with the Sentinels.
That,
That's, I don't know what to read of that, but
that's interesting. I hadn't thought. I mean, the Sentinels for sure have a junkiness to them, but you're right. There is. Yeah, I mean, it's all cables and stuff. It's all cords, like all this umbilical imagery. Um, and yeah. Anyway, hopefully something of this will sort of emerge later as a motif, like as we go through the series. The thing about the Sentinels, what did you call them? Ostrich guns or turkey guns?
Gun ostriches. Yeah.
Gun
ostriches. Yeah.
That singer guy in the Grant Morrison book was commenting. What's the author? Mark Singer, commenting on, like it's sort of it's a post. I'm going to use the word post a lot. Jurassic Park depiction of the dinosaur. Like if the original Sentinels are dinosaurs, then they are like the Tyrannosaurus Rexes, and these are much more. I don't know. They have a varied morphology of the velociraptor, of the insect, the centipede, and kudos to Frank Quitely for like these are wonderful designs. And it's really smart to the master mold always gets front loaded. You can see the master mold, but like all the Sentinels are always viewed at a side or in the form of shadow and that sort of thing. Like, and it reminded me of the thing in RoboCop, James, when they were talking about when they first introduced RoboCop, they made a point of like not showing him first, little snippets, little angles, little weird bits and then shadow.
True. Yeah, it was through a window from behind. It was a slow introduction because they were concerned. Which who knows if these guys were concerned about a similar thing? It was like debuting an aggressive design change like that could make people laugh.
And again, you want to also keep the mystery, and because you don't get the full reveal until the next issue, 115. I just thought, I thought that was interesting. Like there's a lot of and how much is this coming from Frank Quitely, who I'd love to see the scripts on this. And I don't know if they're out there, but I love, I just like to see what Morrison's instructions were in this instance. I just get the sense that things were held off in the particular way because of Frank Quitely.
It's so elaborate too. I'm just looking at Logan walking out of the water when they first get shot down with the poor kid.
Right.
And he's holding that Sentinel head that he's just sort of like destroyed on his way down to the ground, and it's just got like a crude camera inside a bucket helmet with like I don't know what that is, like a 45 basically with a clip dropped out of the bottom of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's like all the technology is it's just crude and like weaponized to be like just aggressive, just like aggressive war tech, like tech, and it's just for killing.
Yeah, and this actually gets to the origin of these version of the Sentinel. So Cassandra, they're in Ecuador, and she comments that like this was established. Like, how does she phrase it? I'm not going to find it soon enough, probably, but she was talking about how it was established by the American military during a pause in here we go, was constructed during a lull in the fighting, rebel forces, government troops backed by the USA, that sort of thing. So this is all 1960s military technology, like 1970s military technology. Like that would have been around the era when this sort of fighting would have occurred in Ecuador. I don't know a thing about the history. I'm not like I'll immediately say that very likely there's a book about the CIA in Ecuador. I was scanning through it. It only goes up to 1960 though. But if it was happening in 1960, it's likely happening in 1970, right? So I'm just going to take as given that there's actual history behind this. So the Sentinels just putting together like these old choppers, these old M16s, these old 45s, right? It's a little more high tech than that, or obviously because it's giant robots, right? But that's the aesthetic.
Yeah, there's a different kind of I don't know. I didn't notice this before too, but Wolverine and Cyclops always have this kind of like they're very. I find them close in this book, which is kind of funny because there's the bromance between them is actually very similar to the complaints that this X-Men 97 cartoon's been getting recently, where it's like, they're saying like, oh, there's a little bit of homoeroticism, there's a little bit of a sort of a bromance between them that's a little bit over the top. It's a little bit of a chippy back and forth, and it's you know what I mean. And there's a little bit of thick air, between them, kind of. And it's just funny to see that like that idea is not unique to there's an undertone of that before, because I sense it in this book that they're not saying there's a relationship, but Grant Morrison toys with the idea throughout this that there's a relationship between the three of them, or that there's a relationship between him and Jean separately to him and Cyclops, which makes him and Cyclops have a sort of a close dynamic that's got a different comfort level that you can sort of like run in that train with. But it's funny to see that someone would complain about that now just because of whatever political polarized events, but not back here. We didn't really, nobody cared.
Because Wolverine's gonna have to respect Cyclops in some way to stay part of the team. Like he would not be able to tolerate that, based on his own ego, his own like impulsiveness, if there wasn't something like that compels him to accept Cyclops' leadership as well.
Yeah, well, this is skipping a little bit ahead to X-Men Annual #1, but I like the contrast between in this first this opening X-Men new X-Men issue, where Wolverine's really picking on Cyclops and really trying to get under his skin, like being a dick. But then he's talking to Domino later, and and she's like, Scott Summers has a king-size bug all the way up his duodenum. You're way off base, darling. He just got back from being taken over by one of them forces of evil we come face to face with every now and again. There's nothing funny about being taken over, and right now he's clinging to sanity with his teeth gritted so hard the beams are shooting out of his ass. Blah blah blah. But you can trust me. You can trust that king-size bug with your life. So there's a respect there. Like he's recognizes that like there's an empathy, right?
Yeah.
Even. But he's not going to show it to Cyclops.
This is another. Yeah. Go ahead. Finish that thought.
Oh no, and Cyclops is, I just love the dynamic. Like when he comments, what I really love, your insane calm under pressure. And it's the same thing with like Wolverine's always testing Cyclops' ability to remain calm and speak rationally. It's because like Cyclops is always doing his best Professor X impression, I think, and Wolverine's always like, "You're full of shit."
Yeah, well, I think this is such a great Cyclops, and I think part of it picks up on that. Like, I think what we see in this comic is a Cyclops who's absorbed the lessons of idealism from Professor X, but is starting to question them and seeing that gray area, and more inclined to be like a little more like almost paramilitary, but like you see it when Cassandra Nova like attacks them in the base, and like Professor X is like, get a formations, and Scott's like, no formations, act on instinct. He's just like overriding in that moment. You see it. I think there's a fantastic moment when that like pig-faced kid who like introducing another one of those evolutionary themes that Grant is playing with it. Like, what if mutation had no advantage and you just had three faces that looked like a pig?
They all look like pigs, mate.
Not good. And then like when that kid like gets roasted, and like Wolverine's like, the kid's dying in agony, Scott, and like Cyclops just steps up and is like, I'm sorry this happened. Like it's I know there's a better place. Just look in my eyes, and like you get that flash of red, like the panels cut to Wolverine and Cassandra, and like you just like that he's like hit him with a huge blast. I think even like there's smoke coming from his head, but like it's just like he's willing in that moment to do the thing, like to put the kid out of his misery.
Yeah, I almost interpreted that as a decapitation. But
yeah, I think so too.
Interesting. Yeah, and you see it later on when he's in the bedroom with Jean, and they're, she's talking about their marriage being cold and whatnot.
I want to talk about that later.
Yeah. But he, I realized many of my high ideals are just based on self-interest and self-deception. I denied it, but I can't get these thoughts out of me. So like there's a sort of sociological, the I guess sociological view of their activities. He still believes it, but he has a much more pragmatic assessment of it. Like his anthropology has changed, like how he views human nature. And yeah, that has ramifications throughout. There are three things that carry us through new X-Men. Scott's possession, these feelings that Scott's having. That's gonna carry through so many storylines. And we haven't talked about Johnny Sublime yet, and we haven't talked about Zorn. I think that, and Cassandra Nova actually is like the first story, like up until the half point, and then we continue with the three things that are established like in these early days. But yeah, Scott's possession is an important thing. You'd wanted to say something, but I guess you want to say it a little bit later.
Yeah, because we're gonna have a discussion about.
Oh, right.
We'll get there. Yeah.
Yes. So when we get to okay, I know what you're talking about.
The mutant apocalypse on Genosha is like awesome, but like actually a lot more minimal than I in my head I made it bigger than it was, and actually thought the cartoon did a better job.
They did.
It's true.
Yeah, cartoon did a much better job because everybody's reaction to Genosha, like you go to the next page and like Hank's making jokes, Hamlet style, to a skeleton, and they're recovering or whatever. But like the deep trauma of a fucking genocide of 15 million people is really not sold.
No, they took the piss right out of it with that.
Yeah, and like I get it. Morrison moves quickly. They're not going to get stuck in the mud. They're going to evoke the sort of sentiments that are required and paper over this, that, and the other thing. But really, there's a genocide, like a Holocaust that happens, and then we get to the action sequence. The action sequence with Cassandra Nova is given much more screen time, and it's weird. It's a weird choice, and even the genocide itself occurs like at a distance. Everything's at a distance.
There's a funny thing too in that this is even though this is like a big Morrison run and it's got very like strong themes and a very clear sort of vision throughout, it still feels written for a serialized issue. Because you would have had that issue and you would have got the mutant apocalypse in your hands, off the newsstand and been like, what the fuck?
Yeah,
and
you would have had
you would have had to sit on that and eat it for a month.
Yeah.
Those
days are quite clear to me. Yeah.
Maybe that effect, is just delivered that way, at the time, and it just doesn't translate well to the, back to this format. But
yeah, because you build it up in your imagination for that. Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah. Whereas with a different writer under a different sort of editorial regime, it would be all like, this is anti-decompression. Everything's as tightly packed as possible, as much information as you could possibly get.
And that's always Grant's MO.
Yeah. But the panel arrangements are quite limited. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
I noticed too when it shifts to action, it's like a film. It's like 4 panels, 5 panels, but like long, and it really flows, and really like they're exciting action scenes in this.
Yeah. Well, that's the Quietly sauce for sure. And working with Morrison, it is they have the sauce together. It's Grant Morrison and Frank Quitely, and it's Mark Millar and Frank Quitely. I honestly, I don't think he's worked very much with anyone else, so maybe my judgment. No, he did that thing with Neil Gaiman. That was kind of more like a collection of pinup pages, which looked great, of course. But I'm trying to think about who else has Quitely worked with. Like, probably not anyone else.
Millar.
Oh no, Millar. I said Millar.
Oh, sorry, I missed that.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyway. Yeah. It's just like it's. We've talked about this over and over. It's a cut above. It's like it's the choice of angles. It is well. It's usually the choice of angles and what is going to get zoomed in on and what isn't. What's going to like how are you going to cut from moment to moment? Um, yeah.
Yeah, his artwork's always like perspective, but like Chris was saying too, like there's there's like an aggression to like the risk taking as well, like just like roast Wolverine's arm right off his body. What
Yeah.
the fuck? So you can really see his healing factor in action. And that's such a and then to see it grow back over 2 or 3 pages, and then by the third page or by the fourth page when he goes, "You okay with this?" It's back. His arm's fully back. So it's just wild to see, because like honestly, for such a cool power, and like for, to me, not a difficult power to display.
Mm-hmm.
It's displayed so fucking infrequently in the comics.
Yeah.
Which I find kind of bizarre, but it's done so
It's tough.
awesomely here.
I'm going to put it on the same list as there's a couple things that scare comic book artists, as I understand it. And one of them is like drawing animals, and specifically drawing animals with like we talked about this with We Three, and it's tough. It's a form of cartooning that is like very difficult to pull off. And I feel that Wolverine's healing factor is like kind of in that same range. There's a I don't know, I don't like a inability to really attend to the truly organic that is difficult for artists, and probably a lot of comics artists who, like, let's be fair, they're comics artists, they're very good, but they're comic. I want to say they're comics artists for a reason, but that's not fair. I mean, like, they're just stuck in a bunch of conventions. And Frank, like, I really liked it. We've talked about, like, he's like Mobius. He's like, well, he's very much like Mobius, but I just like to, and I'm sure this is in interviews, I'd like to get a better sense of like all the things that he claims influences him, and try to figure out what that sauce is, because he just feels so unique. In general.
You had some general complaints about this artwork.
Oh, I did. That's mostly because it's got like, how many different inkers do we have here? So issue 14, he's inked by Tim Townsend. So the first issue has one inker, and it's Haberlin doing the colors. Issue 15 is Tim Townsend and Mark Morales. And then you've got two colorists, Haberlin and then Hi-Fi Colors. And then by issue 116, it's Mark Morales and Dan Green. Dan Green working with John Romita Jr. I think sometimes I just feel the inker's not, it just feels so inconsistent from moment to moment, and some of the images look fantastic. Like, for instance, when issue 116, when Beast is holding up the skeleton or whatever, that's gorgeous. Like, everything, the blacks and the inks, everything's just great. Jean Grey looks fantastic, the rubble, everything. And then you go through a few pages, and you get to Professor X, with Cassandra Nova and whatnot, and like everything feels a little less defined, like something's missing. Like, so I just think that there's a subtle inconsistency. I think in some of the panels, although everything's very good, like, we know that this stuff was late, and we know it's late because there's so many fucking inkers, and colorists changing hands, and you only see that when editorial has to scramble to deal with a penciler who can't fucking do their job. So like, this thing's holding on by the skin of its teeth, and so we're not going to be talking about Ethan Van Sciver's entry into this until next month, but it's no surprise to me, given this shit show, that we get the Ethan Van Sciver, and we get the Igor Corday, and we get just the travesty of artists that get trotted out before Quietly's able to come back. it's there's a universe out there where Quietly is able to just fucking produce pages without being such a prima donna.
As we go along too, I'll probably, well, I'll, you know what? I'll go ahead and I'll just argue it now. It seems like they hit a wall right here, and probably all sat down with editorial and said, okay, well, what the fuck are we gonna do? And he's like, well, bottom line, can't do it.
Yeah.
Like, not gonna be able to get this. So either you pause the book so I can catch up, or we talk to Grant and we pick up what parts of the fucking storyline are going to be awesome and collected.
Yeah.
And I'll start that now, you know. So if they're going to do Riot at Xavier's, great, I'll be on board. I'll do 4 or 6 issues of that, whatever, fuck. And then he can draw that in advance while they just basically parade out the fucking donkey factory.
Yeah, if I remember correctly, Frank ends up doing the last 2 issues of the end of the Cassandra Nova arc, and then doesn't come back until Riot at Xavier's, and then doesn't show up at all after that.
And Riot at Xavier's is clean. And after Riot at Xavier's, who do they replace for the Magneto arc?
Phil Jimenez.
Yes.
Oh shit.
They bring him in, and he's a stud. And that felt to me like they knew Frank was gone, and they needed somebody to hold it down. Which,
yeah, interesting. And then that's the Bloody Hell in America team. Grant Morrison and Phil Jimenez. That's he did a lot of work in the Invisible, so it makes sense, right? He's just going to bring in one of his alum.
He's like, who's another one of your boys? Well,
yeah. Well, we got Phil in the wings. So okay, we haven't talked about. We haven't talked about a lot of the characters yet. Jean Grey in this. Jean Grey and Professor X. Maybe let's pair. No, I don't know. What's a good way to pair her for the purposes of, because she also has like a lot of screen time with Beast.
Yeah. You go anyway, really.
Yeah. Well, anyway, Jean Grey. Jean Grey. What do you think of that?
I don't know. I found her like it was interesting to have Charles is asking her to back away, and she's just brutally outclassed. But which is not a surprise. But there's a part of that I don't like. I get that Grant's.
Oh, you mean against Cassandra Nova?
Yeah, like I don't like Cassandra Nova being I got a nobody villain that nobody knew about. That yeah, sure, we're gonna get a half-ass flush out of that story later. But really, like, she's a superior psychic to Charles Xavier. She's more dangerous than Charles Xavier. And there's no way that Charles and Jean can backpack together with Emma to stop her. That doesn't make any sense. Those are premier psychics.
Yeah.
That's a bit of a hole for me. I don't care for it, but.
That reminds me. Frank Whiteley comes back earlier than the end of this arc because he does that Nuff Said episode where they go into a psychic rescue in progress, but there's no dialogue. That's a really fucking good one. Yeah,
that's a cool one.
Yeah. Anyway, you're right. It is a little strange. Like Cassandra Nova is highly overpowered. We know this when she first attempts to take over Professor X's mind. And shut up, it's all garbage in there.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
There's that,
and that realize.
Yeah, it's cool, but
I haven't read these for a while, and I don't remember exactly how it goes. But it did strike me and I only realized it in hindsight that she tells him I will make you a murderer. I'm going to be you, and then at the end he's of course shot her. So kind of comes true.
Well, he does. I mean, he does a bunch more murders after that too. But actually, I'll take back what I said about a density of panels like that. It's a 12 panel grid when Xavier's being fighting off Cassandra Nova, and he's like Morrison's slowing it down. There's pop bottles exploding, and he's slowly reaching into his vest. So he can pull out the gun and then boom, get out of my head or I'll fire. And that's that. Okay, 2 things about Professor X in this story. 3 things. One, we said this last time, but he's a teacher. all that bullshit, all that dark secrets of Professor X shit is, it's actually like it's about to get thrown out the window, but at the same time it's also being like evoked, because like Cassandra Nova is presented as a sort of a secret of Professor X, because she doesn't have earlobes as well. She looks, Wolverine's always like, how come she looks exactly like you, Chuck? Like all the various all the obvious things are there. But he's a teacher. He's highly paternalistic. And Jean Grey's response to that is like, okay, that works with Scott and everybody else, but not me. But he's very fatherly, which is, makes sense for what he is. It's the very 1960s Professor X. So he's a teacher. And he's badass. This is the most badass thing that Professor X has probably ever done in his life. Threatening to blow his own brains out if you try to like.
Yeah.
That's
I got to keep a gun on me, because if anyone ever got a hold of my mind, oh god.
Yeah.
Well, I don't remember a time before, like, or this is like he introduces his mind almost as a weapon of mass destruction.
Yeah.
And that's I don't know, that's a newer. I'm sure I'm wrong, and it's been.
I don't think you are.
With
No,
before,
you're not.
But...
No, you're not wrong at all. I'm certain of it. I'm sure everybody talked about how like, oh, he's so powerful or whatever, but like never this idea that Professor X would murder himself for the greater good.
Or that never the idea that his mind could be used to murder mass chunks of the population.
Yeah, and just shut him down. And Cassandra Nova recognizes, but again, this whole story is predicated on the fact that of a machine, of the fact that Beast has built Cerebra, and it's not like, it doesn't actually make a lot of sense.
Because it amplifies his power by 10 times, and she fucking jumps in there from Ecuador, standing in the middle of a bush. Yeah.
Like, and I guess she saw that the time was right, but everything about
find it, she didn't know where he was until he activated Cerebra, and then she's like, it led me right to you.
Oh, that's very interesting, and that's mysterious. All that shit's mysterious, and you're like, I remember reading this the month, and I was like, oh my goodness, what's happening? I love it.
Yeah. That's a great kill, Emma. Just kind of like snapping the neck.
Oh, that's a beauty.
Oh, again, we talked about this last time, James. Like the no, Emma, I'm Charles. It's all right there. No, and then she shoots him, and earlier Professor X has said, I would never use it to take another life. And we're led to believe that like he means it. But in this instance, the audience, like, we don't share Professor X's ideals. And so we don't realize that like, the game's been given away by the fact that he used the gun. May posterity forgive me. And we just take it. We just really go along with it because like, of course you kill the bad guys. But like when Jean Grey is, this is one of my favorite moments in this actually, when Beast is talking about how about Emma, about Cassandra Nova, and I think this is Beast talking about Cassandra Nova. I think she'll instinctively use her outlandish natural gifts to wipe us out if she can. This would become a war for the domination of the biosphere. And then Jean Grey's like, domination, war, Henry. Can't we think of better ways to deal with this? And like
a good moment.
Yeah, like, and that should be like, that's at the center of Professor X's ideology. It is an actual sort of fine. They train for violence, but they're an emergency response unit, as Morrison has cast them, and they're not interested in war or domination, and they feel that those concepts are themselves violent.
And I think this is one of those moments too that touches on Grant's bigger project, the sort of meta text tying into Invisibles of like, what can imagination be used for? Can we think of things that are better? And of course, it's you're gonna have conflict, you're gonna have violence, because that's what we're here for. But like that, just that a gesture to the idea of like imagination. He does it with Zorn too at the end. Yeah,
Yeah.
But it's sort of like, what other forms are possible? What can we really apply our imaginations to?
Yeah, and the Cassandra Nova, as we're going to see, at the end, like her defeat at the end, which is quite complex and set up beautifully, is yeah, this theme will continue. I guess I'll just say that. Um, yeah, I like getting back to James, what you were saying about the jarring transition that this comic represents. Like putting aside the comic, like the fact that Frank Quietly's drawing it is enough. It's much like Mike Allred coming in to do X-Force, which they do a little nod to in this comic when during the genocide in the Times Square. You can see Edie, the Yugo, yeah, and one of the girls is wearing a T-shirt, a dupe T-shirt. So that's a nice little nod to what Peter Milligan was up to before this. Anyway, Beast, putting aside the art, which is just a something never seen before in X-Men comics, Beast's transformation into Beauty and the Beast. The Beast from Beauty and the Beast.
There's a nod to he has a rose on his desk too.
Oh yeah, I didn't think about what that rose meant, but yeah, that's that's funny. He also has a doll on his desk. That's weird.
That also sort of leads back into what both of you were saying earlier Chris, when you were mentioning Pig there, that kid with the three faces is like, there's like almost he introduces a little bit of a theme that the mutations not necessarily evolving, like it's not you're not necessarily like gaining anything spectacular from it.
Yeah, I think one thing I love about this, and I think it's like, I don't want to over exaggerate, but like wildly exciting, is just how into Morrison is about the idea of just spinning like any different way you can think about evolution or change. From Beast's secondary mutations, like Emma, like things are the U-Men, like just what are all these angles? Like, Gabe got this idea of like of things mutating, but like what does that really mean, and what directions could it go?
And what sort of like Ugly John or whatever, great name for him.
Yeah.
You guys are the good looking muties, eh? Notice Ugly John. Yeah, there's a distinction, those who can pass and those who can't. Not that
which
I
again
think
was always there
Cyclops
with the
does.
Morlocks.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. But it, like with the Morlocks, they're living in the fucking sewer or whatever. Like it's kind of on the nose. Here they're just they're rescuing a guy from. Oh, and actually, funny thing. Sorry, one. This is Morrison's approach to continuity in X-Men comics. They're flying over Australia, and they're in the X-wing, and it's Wolverine, and he's like popping out bullets from his healing factor, which is a really nice touch. I've never been lucky down under. When the X-Men were in Australia, Wolverine got crucified by the Reavers and left in the desert to die, and had to be rescued by Jubilee. And that's Morrison's way of referring to that. And it's like, again, getting back to these nods and these things, like the past still exists, but we're not going to we're just going to change our emphasis upon what we're going to look at. I think that's nice. And so also, good. Yeah, and he's just like, but hey, enough about my love life, and he changes it to the word lucky becomes about sex, but if you know, you know.
That is cool.
Yeah.
And then you move to the Zorn intro, unless you guys are.
I think it's a good time to shift over. Yeah.
Yeah, I think there'll be a good opportunity to. Jean doesn't feature prominently in the Zorn thing, and we haven't talked about Emma, but yeah, this will give us a great opportunity to talk about Emma.
I think so.
Yeah. Okay. So, new X-Men. I just want to talk about this all night. New X-Men annual 2001. I don't know if they had. They never did another one of these sideways comics.
Oh,
It's a
the
shame.
format was great.
Yeah,
I
I.
don't know. Was sequential art's really nice in this format, which is sort of weird.
Mhm. So who do we got here? We got Grant Morrison, writer. We got Lionel Francis Yu on inks. On pencils. Jerry Allen Gwillam on inks, and then Hi-Fi Design doing the colors here. I think some of the coloring is fantastic. And you saw it in New X-Men as well, like with Whiteley. And some of it's kind of like muted, but then every once in a while it really dazzles. Like when they jumped out of that window, I shared that image with you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
They're going down to the swimming pool. Like that's wonderful. And the way
That's
that
fantastic.
the glass is all broken and you can see the foreground and the background and so on and so forth, and just great. Anyway, great stuff.
So Lionel Yu here was he wasn't a bad transition. I really liked his art through this little book, but
Yeah, well, it's a different vibe. Like you get in the Lionel Yu vibe. And you're just like, okay, well, this is like we're back to something resembling regular comics art. Although it's not. Like it's got that Filipino style that is very like faces. Like there's no attention to naturalism. I think like I don't know what these figures are doing. Like they're every once in a while you get a figure that like a face that looks like a face, and the rest of the time and they just like I couldn't tell you what emotion anybody's feeling or whether or not they're
the
human.
the introduction of that what's that guy's name, Chris?
Oh, the
Sublime?
human?
Yeah, Sublime
Oh,
guy
Sublime,
with
Mr.
the
Sublime, yeah.
yeah with the mic on. That picture of his face is very Will Portatio.
Yeah, yeah.
Like all so like I don't know if there's influence between the two of them or.
Oh, yeah, no, I think so. Yeah, yeah. Well, that's what I'm saying. Like they got like a Filipino style. There's a way of I think I don't know this for certain, but I think that there's actually like a Will's like direct Will's influence in the form of like mentorship. I could be completely fucking off base about that, but I feel that I read that somewhere once upon a while. Um, yeah.
Yeah, and then this
So,
book's a covert mission. But Emma, like you guys are saying, Emma gets the opposite treatment for the secondary mutation in that she gets like fucking god powers. She gets like a diamond skin that basically deactivates her psychic powers, takes her completely off the radar, but makes her indestructible.
mhm.
And that's odd, but fun.
You know where that came from?
No.
Apparently he wanted to use Colossus in this.
Yeah.
But I think was it that he wanted to kill Colossus off, or he wanted? I'm not sure that what happened. For whatever reason, Marvel's like, nope, can't do it. So he's like,
he was
fine,
in another series. There was something going on.
okay,
Yeah, or he
okay.
was dead. I think he's dead at this time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's like, all right, I'll just give Emma the same power, like the.
Are you serious?
Unstoppable body, yeah.
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
That's why he didn't have more McTaggart in it either, because they had both died recently. Yeah, I'm looking at the notes on the Morrison manifesto that's collected at the end of E for Extinction, and the editor, or maybe it's Colossus and Mariah both died recently. So if we're going to get away from the elements that are static septic, they have to stay dead. The X-Men, like us, no loss. Anyway, yeah, he was dead at the time, but he did want to use Colossus. The choice of Emma ends up being inspired, though.
I love Emma in this.
Yeah, and like her working with the X-Men makes a lot of sense. Like she was the headmaster with Banshee in Generation X. Scott Lobdell spent a lot of time rehabilitating the White Queen and working her directly into the X-Men. Like I feel that like this comic, if you didn't, it feels like she's coming at the X-Men for the first time, but she's had a long history with them at this point, and Morrison's just sort of picking up on it. It's kind of unfair. It's almost like whatever work Lobdell was doing is just like thrown out the window, which is fine, but
yeah, good choice.
She's positioned in Genosha when it opens. Like she's this teacher in Genosha, right? And then because of the genocide, she ends up kind of like, well, it's kind of like walking in because she forgot her purse, and the mansion kills Cassandra Nova and sort of like is part of the team after that unofficially.
Yeah. So this comic is much more sexy than what we've seen from the new X-Men comics, like the Frank Whiteley stuff. The thing, of course, it opens up with Zorn being forced to murder children. That's not sexy.
Melt them into a pool. Yeah.
But then, okay, so we got the opening page where they're coming into Hong Kong, and White Queen she's like, so tell me, Scott, what's all this I hear about your vow of celibacy? And you guys probably didn't notice, but the building to which they're approaching is Hitachi. It's the Hitachi Corporation, which maybe I'm the only one who knows this, but they make vibrators. They also make excavators and a number of other equipment, but they're largely, they're a vibrator brand. And so you immediately get like a completely different, I'm going to use a pun, vibe off this comic.
Nicely done.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Later on, Wolverine's going to be like with
That's
Domino.
Great. Yes.
Yeah.
He's just.
He's going to say, hey, want to catch a few drinks later? And she's like, no strings. Let's bang one out.
Yeah.
That's so odd. That's a great. That's we always talk about that too, and that's a great adult comic add-in. Weird sexless Green Lantern adventures are fine, but adding this in really lets the imagination flow, and you don't have to go crazy. Little comment like that.
Well, it's actually a little bit, some people have all the breaks. So you need some company after this gig, and she's like, can't hide the man with hypersenses, huh? Like, what's he smelling? Like that's what gets
picking up on
oh,
yeah.
damn.
Yeah, and so things get really biological really fast. And yeah, I love that. Such a nice touch.
Such a good Wolverine,
they
too.
certainly do with Ao Jun. Fucking gross.
Is he my fantasy is to see two white women like wrestle in crude oil until they suffocate or something like that.
Yeah, like dolls on the beaches of Q8.
Yeah, and just at the end, he before he commits suicide and betrays John Sublime, he says, "My fantasies have all come true to last night," and so we're like, "What?"
I picked up on that too.
Yeah, I'd never noticed that before. And this is grotesque, like all these dandruff things that are like turning into like the Invisible Man when he's forming images, or the Thing, like more like the Thing.
Yeah. The eyes of Ao Jun. No.
Yeah.
Those fucking things are like staring at everybody in the room, and they're like half formed.
Yeah. So there's this. Getting back to what you were saying, Chris, about like mutation, things are allowed to be much uglier and more grotesque under Morrison's idea of what mutation can amount to, and you see that a lot more in this comic.
Yeah. And this week, we got to get into this idea of the U-Men, like this, and it's like almost like a take on fan culture or like celebrities, but it's just like or plastic surgery, or I think you'll have a different take on this, but it's just an obsession of like we are like we're human. We're mutant souls in weak, flawed human bodies, but like by grafting things onto them, then we can like approximate mutation. I think there's lines something like people accept piercings and tattoos, and why not these body modifications as well?
Yeah. So there's, I guess, two things. The first is something I hadn't alluded to at this point yet, but I mean, like it is not a coincidence that this story takes place in China and isn't about organ snatching. It's very much like playing into like the totalitarian fantasy of China. They basically, the Chinese government is handing over mutants as part of their effort to exterminate, to to manage the population in the same way that they limit births, right? And so, like, I don't mind anyone taking a pot shot at Chinese totalitarianism. Like, have at it. I just wanted to emphasize that, like, that's what Morrison's doing here. But kind of in a stereotypical, like I said, organ snatching fashion. That's one of the few things about Chinese totalitarianism that I don't believe is true. Maybe that's my own naivete. I can't get behind that one. But nonetheless, that's what's going on here. And so the second thing is, like, and again, Mark Singer recognizes this as well, that the human is this idea of, like, becoming surgically something else. And given that mutants are often, they can stand in for a lot of different figures, like Jews, homosexuals, blacks, the subaltern generally. But there is, there's this idea that mutant equals gay, or no, well, sorry, no, that muddles things in a way that I'm not intending. But just the idea that mutants equals just some sort of subaltern. What the human are in this instance is, I'm collecting my thoughts. Okay, let's go back to Fanny for a minute. Here's where my thoughts start. Okay,
yep.
And I'll try to lead you through it, and also try to make sense to myself. So, James, sorry about this, but in the Invisibles, there's a character, a Brazilian witch, who is born a man but dresses as a woman, and they are a woman, right? And sometime in the story of the Invisibles, another character asks her, Lord Fanny, why didn't you get the surgery to become a woman? And Lord Fanny's reply is, there's nothing wrong with me. I wasn't sick. I just, there is something within Morrison that the idea that you can choose a gender, but you don't need to surgically involve yourself to change. And as a matter of fact, the only people who engage in surgery for the purposes of changing gender are the outer church. There's something about surgery which is presented as inimical to good vibes. It's a bad thing to do. Similarly, here with the human, one wants to choose to be something else. Morrison is positioning that choice as, like, you can choose to be anything you like, but once you start engaging in surgery in order to attain that end, there's something wrong with it. It is a mockery of human rights charters, is what's being presented here. But at the same time, you're right, Chris, that it is about fan culture. It is and it's more like, what would a media frenzy and an attempt by society to co-opt the mutant look like? Because we always co-opt black culture, gay culture, this culture, that culture, whatever's hip, whatever's subaltern. It's something that can be grist for the mill of capital. Morrison's alluding to that, and I don't think for a single fucking moment that Morrison is attempting to be, like, bigoted in any sense. I just think that there's kind of an unfortunate connotation in Morrison's work that excludes a certain sort of trans identity. I don't want to. Yeah, I don't know. That's my initial thought.
Yeah, I don't think that you're coming down too hard on that, and I can kind of see that. I think my objection to that is that I think it's a worthwhile game to play, to say, like, let's see if the book can be read as as a metaphor for X or whatever. But I don't think you're saying this necessarily, but I think other takes have. But I stick to the fact that, like, this is a blender of ideas about, like, how can we spin evolution and change in as many ways as possible, and just kind of, like, spin off almost like running light through a prism. And I think it's probably a bad criticism to hold an author's feet to the fire if you don't like the result of playing that game, because you can just step out from that game and say, okay, I don't think that they really mean that in this way, especially given Grant's, like own
Yeah.
sense of gender and like the history there. Like we're not,
Yeah.
this is not someone who's hateful or
No,
coming
not
down
at all. And like there's no well the X-Men are anti-hate. They're anti-war, anti-domination, like, and all of that comes through, even despite the violence and like the fucking slaughter
No,
at
in
the
fact,
hands of the Wolverine.
One thing that really interested me is like I started to pick up on like Emma Frost is getting like the Lord Fanny lines. Like there's a Lord Fanny vibe to Emma, and I was thinking that if anyone is a metaphor for trans like change of bodies, it's Emma. Like that diamond body, like that idea of like like I look spectacular in this, like I'm glamorous, like and she says something like in diamond form, like I'm cold and I don't have empathy and I'm just like a cold bitch or whatever. It's just like this idea of power being enwrapped in this new form.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Funny story. Scott Lobdell had her take over Iceman, like not take over, but be transferred into Iceman's body at some point. So she's literally experienced sort of a transgender lifestyle. She also had an extended experience with Jean Grey's psyche. I forget if she was actually in Jean Grey's body, like way back when Whilce Portacio was drawing X-Men, something to that effect. So anyway, she's just an interesting thing, kind of in the background. Again, Scott Lobdell.
Yeah, one of the other things too with the trans topic, Grant himself, like I don't know that, like I did pick up everything you guys are saying, and I mean, like it's not subtext or anything, so you can read it that way, but I don't know that the information and sort of like it was different then than it is today.
That's very true.
So I don't know that his take on it would have. I think it can be interpreted differently, and I don't know that you could even have had that take on it back then.
That's a great way to, in time and in current understanding of gender, these things arise out of it, but it like you wouldn't have picked that up at the time. I don't think anyone did.
That's what I mean.
Yeah, I bet there was I bet certain eyes picked it up. Like
that could be true.
These discourses have been going on for a long time, and like I'm really not interested in like measuring Morrison's liberal purity. I just think it's interesting that I just think it's interesting. Like that kind of a well-meaning, interesting idea. I don't think I even would have thought much of it if I didn't know so much about Morrison through their other works. Again, getting back to Lord Fanny and getting back to The Outer Church and stuff like that. It kind of colors the thing, and I'd like to pay attention to this because Sublime again is the true through line through the entire X-Men arc up until Morrison's conclusion.
Interesting.
And like that's going to end up meaning more than perhaps Morrison meant.
Yeah. I'm realizing how little I remember of this, so I'm really excited to continue on with this.
And again, otherwise I just leave it be. I just be like, oh, that's kind of interesting, but it ends up baked into the entire DNA. And I don't know, I genuinely don't know if it's going to like amount to anything, but it's worth pointing out for that reason.
Sure.
Yeah.
I'm just looking at your great page there, James, that jump out of the window.
Oh, it's so good. Zorn, as you know, is going to be revealed later to be Magneto.
I wasn't sure if you were going to do that.
Yeah. Oh, you think I was going to bring it up?
I thought maybe you're going to hide it till the big.
Can I just say that it's fucking bullshit? I said it in our original conversation. I'm going to say it now.
Is.
There's no fucking way that that's Magneto in this book.
Yeah.
No fucking way.
That's an afterthought. Yeah, it feels like an afterthought. And there's no way to explain it away. This is a full fucking origin.
Yeah.
So they had Magneto under wraps for like 20 years. Is that where we're meant to be? Oh, I guess we'll find.
Well, all the hints were there, guys. He was in an iron cage, man.
Yeah,
Well,
even though they call it lead, they later on like throughout. I don't know, man. Like sometimes Morrison's audacity insults the intelligence, and this is definitely one of those instances. Like it's unexcusable. It's a ridiculous farce. Like what do we say about it's Jeff Loeb style fucking reveals?
Oh, true.
Yeah, and sorry, Morrison, but that's hack. That's hack as fuck.
Well, yeah, like unless you had an issue where Magneto fucking came out from the sewers after the Genosha attack, found Zorn, dumped a bucket of water on his star, put it out, and just like rolled him into a gutter somewhere and took his place. Like there's no that's as close as you can get to being like letting me have Zorn be Magneto.
Yeah. Because this is much more literally about the oppression, and again, it takes place in China, so like it's the place of maximum oppression. The mutants, this powerful who could have been the Buddha, could have been a healer, could have been all these things. All of Xavier's dream, essentially, like this pacifist dream of mutants leading humanity into enlightenment. The Chinese have clamped it down. I wouldn't be they don't say, but I mean, like, it would be a little on the nose if he was from Tibet, but it kind of wouldn't surprise me if that was the idea here. And he joins the X-Men, and again, it gets back to that sigil thing, that magical incantation. And I had such like, Zorn gets that issue devoted to him later, like much, much later. Zorn is like not really. He's dropped for months and months and months, and then suddenly reappears in the story again. And anyway, it was just so exciting. It was like such a breath of fresh air.
He's the Marquis de Sade.
He kind of is, yeah. But yeah, taken out of prison.
I'm just realizing how bad, like literally Emma, like Scott has to get Emma to patch somebody into his mind so that he can speak Chinese to Zorn, and that's the only way they can communicate. Like they're reading his mind, like as they go.
Yeah, they gotta know if it's fucking Magneto or not. I do like how
when did Magneto ever speak Chinese?
There we go. That's another t-shirt
sure.
for the Extinction Agenda.
On a roll today.
It's up there with remember that time RoboCop shot that guy in the dick.
So like when Beast is talking to Zorn, and like this is all very cool. Like it's pure imagery, like, and it gets back to the, I'm repeating myself, but the incantation thing. So like, but also it's very funny because Beast is like, don't worry, Scott's very good with the depressed, and you see like, and so it almost seems like Scott's on stage, like he's doing a stand-up thing. It's not so hard to lighten up. Think about the all these theories about this, and then you see his mind working as he's trying to like persuade this person, and it's much more improvisational and a little more funny than you think. I love the team dynamic in this. Everybody plays off each other extremely well. Like when they're fighting Cassandra Nova and Wolverine. So like it starts off silently. It's just like Cyclops just like issues commands to people, but not commands. He says their names: Logan, Jean, Beast. Everybody knows what to do. Everybody supports each other, and they have like this silent trust among one another that has been earned by 18 years of X-Men history. Like everything that Chris Claremont set up, we're ready to believe that these people just like know each other because we know them, right? We know what everybody's going to do. And when Wolverine's in trouble, he just yells team, and then they support him, right? And Wolverine's job is to take the beating while everybody figures out what to do. And that's exactly what happens. And it's cool. It's like I'm excited to think more about that dynamic and how Morrison presents it throughout this series. because it's very elegant. You love these characters, and Morrison loved these characters, and wants to be sort of playful with them, but at the same time, cast a magic spell. Because getting back to the Zorn thing, he's these theories about black hole collapses into itself, it becomes a white hole somewhere. Imagine what you could do. Imagination is the only thing which can survive a gravitational collapse. And like that's such a fucking wild statement. And Zorn considers it. He cools down, and what does Cyclops do? He literally hands him the keys to unshackle himself. And that's fucking gorgeous.
Yeah. And that's good. That's total good vibes versus bad vibes. To either you're a black hole, like sort of like, and that I wonder if that's partially like, again, another manifesto, like comics. Like, are we gonna do are we just gonna sink into like this like fucking image nihilism and like just keep doing this shit, or are we gonna use our imaginations and like dream something cool?
It's his JLA run. Like Mageddon, like what did JLA's existence was to fight existential angst.
Yeah.
And this is Morrison's take on it, and which is always Morrison's take. Like that's the primary theme of their work. How does one self-actualize in a universe in which there's all these dark vibes, man? And I know that's derogatory, but like it's also not wrong.
It's true.
Yeah, love it. Love it.
I was just looking at the team's Tomahawk missile strike from the jet. The fuck?
That's another good one.
That's great.
This is a fantastic format.
So did you guys have X-Men 117 at the end of your books?
Oh, with Skeever? Yeah, I've got that at mine in the E for Extinction collection. I don't have the fancy collection you have, whatever that is.
It's not fancy. It's just one book. So it's got the Morrison bit, and then it jumps into that wide issue with Lionel Yu, and then it goes to 117, the first Van Skeever, and that's it.
Right.
And then there's a little bit of a Frank sketchbook at the end, and that's
okay.
Like 2 pages of
concept. Yeah. Well, sorry, and you said you have the Morrison manifesto at the end?
No.
Oh, I see. Okay. In the original, I bought this apparently November in 2001, first printing. Yeah. Anyway, it has a Morrison manifesto at the end. It's basically his pitch.
That's cool.
Yeah. But it's all online. You can find it anywhere. Fucking old news. But it's bits of the script.
This is 2002.
Okay. Yeah. So they got second printing or whatever. Well, you can't always be as fortunate as me.
Well, easy come, easy go. First edition.
Yeah, we're always fucking nerds at the end. I'm just like, I'm a little Johnny Sublime over here. I'm not afraid to say it.
You should have you should have that thing in a plastic box.
I should. There was a fucking guy at my corners at my local comic shop. So they loved the fact. They fucking loved the fact. The boys at Treehouse Collectibles here in Toronto, which is a great shop. Anyone who lives in Toronto, it's a good shop. They're good guys. But they love the fact that I do not accept bags and boards. And the entire point of their operation is like everything's bagged. They've got like those graded comics in the background, like everybody does. And one customer was there one day.
Outrageous.
He was just shocked. He was like, "What are you doing? What are you doing? Put those babies back in the thing." And I was like, "No way, man. I'm just gonna read these. And you know what? I'm gonna throw them out when I'm done." Which is, like I've kept a lot of comics in my life, but I've so many fucking comics in my life.
Hey, man, I remember I used to walk around with you and just have you hand them off to like a random kid that was walking by.
Yeah. So here you go. Take the comics. Do something with them. There's a limit to what I'm going to enjoy from this product. Generally speaking, with Morrison, no, this stuff stays. Like you should stay, audience. Stay tuned to future installments of the Extinction Agenda. What are we doing next week? I think, James, we're going to be doing Batman.
Oh, yeah. Oh, is it technically All-Star Batman? No, it's All-Star Batman.
It's All-Star
and Robin.
Batman and yeah.
Frank Miller's All-Star Batman and Robin featuring Jim Lee.
That's a funny way of putting it. Not wrong though. Also not wrong.
Yeah, it's the only time Jim Lee takes a fucking backseat.
Yeah, he really does too. I can't wait to talk about that. That's gonna be fantastic. But until we talk about that next week, I suppose the future will be mutant. I was trying to think of a better way of doing my Punisher ending. The E for will be for extinction.
And you did it.
Yes. But there's no E.
Now, all we need is a little energon and a lot of luck.